The atmosphere in the country club dining room hummed with hushed conversations and the soft clink of fine china. I was seated at my usual corner, my gaze fixed on my brother Thomas, who was entertaining clients across the room. His role of client host had become routine, happening 3 or 4 times a week, all funded by the company's expense account. "Your usual, Miss Carter?" the waiter asked, already holding my gin and tonic. I nodded without breaking my stare from Thomas. He was laughing too loudly at something a client had said, his designer watch gleaming as he gestured. The same watch I had noticed in an Instagram post the previous day, not on his wrist, but worn by a woman who most certainly wasn't his wife, Rachel. "I'm Sarah Carter, and 2 years ago, I made a colossal mistake. I let my brother convince me to step aside from the CEO role I had worked 15 years to secure, all because he claimed he needed it more than I did. Think about it, Sarah," he had pleaded in our father's office. "You're single, you live alone. I have kids to care for, private school isn't cheap, and with a new baby on the way." He left the rest unsaid, letting the implication hang. Dad was retiring as CEO of Carter Industries, the tech consulting firm he had built from the ground up. Everyone had expected me to take over. I had the expertise, the education, and solid connections with our major clients. But Thomas had other plans. Now, watching him schmooze clients with money meant to support his family, I felt an old familiar anger bubbling up. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, the head of it and my closest ally at the company. "You need to see this," it read, followed by a link to a bank statement. I opened it, nearly choking on my drink as I saw the transfer. $50,000 to Vanessa Mitchell's account. The third such transfer this month. Vanessa Mitchell, the marketing consultant with a delicate wrist adorned with my brother's watch. The woman who seemed to spend more time vacationing in luxury resorts than consulting. "Would you like to order dinner, Miss Carter?" The waiter returned, notepad ready. "No, thank you," I replied, gathering my things. "I need to get back to the office." The drive to Carter Industries took only 15 minutes. In that short span, I replayed every sacrifice I had made for Thomas. Each time I had taken a step back, shrunk myself down to make room for his needs. As children, I gave up piano lessons so he could pursue his football training. In high school, I worked part-time to help fund his college prep courses. Even after joining the family business, I was always the one staying late, fixing his errors, covering his absences, but giving up the CEO position, that had been the hardest of all. Marcus was waiting for me when I arrived. At 40, he'd been with the company nearly as long as I had, and he had always distrusted Thomas. "There's more," he said, opening his laptop and turning it toward me. "Look at these expense reports." I scrolled through page after page of questionable charges. First-class flights for meetings that conveniently aligned with Vanessa's Instagram posts from exotic locations. 5-star hotel stays charged to the company when Thomas was supposedly attending industry conferences. "He's not even trying to hide it anymore," Marcus muttered, shaking his head. "He thinks he's untouchable." "How long have you been tracking this?" I asked, though I had a feeling I knew the answer. "Since he took over," Marcus admitted. "Something felt off from the beginning. The way he pushed you out, how quickly he changed company policies, and loosened oversight on expenses." I leaned back in my chair, my thoughts turning to Rachel, my sister-in-law and friend since college, to my nieces and nephew, whom Thomas insisted needed private schooling and trust funds. "Does Rachel know?" I asked, my voice tight with concern. Marcus shook his head. "I don't think so. He's been hiding all the money he's funneling to Vanessa and business expenses." He paused. "And? Go on." "He's been siphoning money from the kids' trust funds. Small amounts at first, but it's adding up." The rage that had been smoldering inside me burst to the surface. The trust funds were set up by our father to secure the children's future. The fact that Thomas was stealing from his own kids was unforgivable. "Show me everything," I demanded, pulling my chair closer to Marcus's laptop. Every transaction, every lie, every expense. For the next 3 hours, we combed through financial records, cross-referencing dates and locations. The picture that emerged was damning. Not only had Thomas been cheating on Rachel, but he had been embezzling from the company to fund his double life. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked, looking at me, his concern evident. I stared at a framed photo on my desk, Thomas and me at his wedding, both smiling, his arm around my shoulders. "First, I need to talk to Dad. He needs to know what's happening to his company, I said, my voice steady but firm. Then I thought about all the years I had sacrificed for Thomas, putting his needs ahead of mine. After that, I said, standing up, I'm taking back what's mine, but I need to protect Rachel and the kids first. I grabbed my phone and dialed Rachel's number. She picked up on the third ring, her voice weary. Sarah, is everything okay? We need to talk, I said, my heart heavy with the truth I had to deliver. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow? There's something you need to know. I ended the call, and Marcus watched me closely. Are you sure you're ready for this? Once you start, there's no turning back. I nodded, gathering the evidence into a folder. Thomas left me no choice. He's not just betraying his family, he's destroying everything our father built, and I won't stand by and watch it happen anymore. As I walked to my car, I passed Thomas's empty parking spot. He was probably still at the country club, spending more company money. For 2 years, I had watched him take everything I had worked for and treat it like his personal piggy bank. But that was all about to change. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of reclaiming the company and my own power. Thomas had always underestimated me, seeing me as the obedient sister who would always put him first. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. At 7:00 a.m., the coffee shop was quiet. When Rachel walked in, she looked drained, the dark bags under her eyes barely hidden by a layer of makeup. Her usually flawless blonde hair was hastily tied into a messy ponytail. This was not the Rachel I was accustomed to. Sorry I'm late, she said, settling into the booth across from me. Tommy wouldn't stop crying, and Emily had a breakdown over her science project. I slid a latte across the table to her, her usual, with an extra shot of espresso. How's everything at home, Rachel? Honestly, she said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup, avoiding my gaze. It's fine, you know how it is. Thomas is always busy with work, the kids are a handful, and I asked quietly, the money. Is everything okay with that? Her head snapped up, a mix of surprise and something else. Fear, flashing across her face. What do you mean? I pulled out the folder I prepared, my heart heavy with the weight of what I was about to share. Rachel, there's something you need to see. It's about Thomas and how he's been handling the company's money. Money that was supposed to be there for you and the kids. For the next half hour, I walked her through everything Marcus and I had uncovered. The transfers to Vanessa Mitchell, the luxury purchases, the draining of the children's trust funds. With each new piece of information, Rachel grew paler. I knew something wasn't right, she whispered at last, staring at a photo of Thomas and Vanessa together at a Bali resort, a trip Thomas had claimed was a business conference. He's been so distant, always working late, going on these business trips, but I never thought. There's more, I said softly, showing her the trust fund documents. He's been taking money from the kids' accounts. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth, tears starting to fall. How could he? That money was for their education, for their future. I reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. I have a plan to fix this and protect you and the kids, but I need to know if you're willing to help me. She wiped away her tears, straightening up. The strong, determined Rachel I knew was starting to reappear beneath the shock. What do you need me to do? For the next hour, we worked out a plan. Rachel would document everything she knew about Thomas's spending, his absences, his lies. She would also secure copies of their personal financial records, evidence we would need for the battle ahead. What about the kids? She asked as we were about to leave. How do I keep them safe from all of this? Let me handle Thomas, I said. You focus on the kids. And Rachel, I've already talked to my lawyer. We can file an emergency injunction to freeze the trust funds before he can take any more. She hugged me tightly as she left, whispering, "Thank you," through fresh tears. Back at the office, Marcus had more news. Thomas just booked another business trip to the Maldives. 2 first-class tickets, presidential suite. I glanced at my watch. It's almost time for the executive meeting. Is everything in place? He handed me a USB drive. All the evidence is here, including the security footage from last night. Ah, the security footage. Thomas had no idea that staying late at the office with Vanessa would be the thing that sealed his fate. The cameras had caught everything. Their intimate conversation, their plans to run away together, Thomas's promises to leave Rachel once he had enough money. The executive boardroom filled up as I took my seat. Thomas was the last to arrive, looking smug in his expensive suit. He barely acknowledged me as he took his place at the head of the table. "Before we start," I said, standing, "there's something the board needs to see." Thomas frowned. "Sarah, we have an agenda." "Yes, we do," I replied, cutting him off as I plugged the USB drive into the system. "This is about some financial irregularities that have recently come to light." Thomas's face drained of color as the first spreadsheet appeared on the screen. "This is unnecessary," he tried to protest, but the board chairman, Mr. Davidson, raised a hand to silence him. "Let her speak, Thomas." For the next 15 minutes, I laid out everything: the embezzled funds, the fake business expenses, the stolen trust money. I saved the security footage for last. As it played, the room fell into stunned silence. Thomas sat there, frozen, his face a mix of rage and fear. "This is a personal matter," he finally spat. "It has nothing to do with the company." "Nothing to do with the company?" Mr. Davidson's voice was frosty. "You've been stealing company funds, falsifying expense reports, and using company resources for an affair. I'd say that's pretty relevant." Thomas turned to me, eyes blazing. "You did this. You've been planning this from the start, haven't you? Waiting for the chance to take everything from me." I met his gaze without flinching. "No, Thomas, you did this. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal. Those were your choices. I just made sure everyone saw them." The board immediately called an emergency session. Thomas was suspended, pending an investigation, and his access to company accounts was revoked. As security escorted him out of the building, he turned back once more. "You're my sister," he sneered. "How could you do this to me?" "I'm also your victim," I answered calmly, "and so is your family. That's something you need to think about." The following weeks were a blur of audits, legal consultations, and damage control. Rachel filed for divorce, securing an emergency order to protect the remaining trust funds for the children. Vanessa Mitchell disappeared as soon as the money stopped flowing. Her Instagram vanished without a trace. Our father retired, but still remained on the board and came to visit me in my office. "I should have seen it," he said, looking older than his 70 years. "Should have realized Thomas wasn't ready for this responsibility." I poured us both coffee, his black, mine with cream. "He fooled a lot of people, Dad. He was good at making everyone see what they wanted to see." "But not you," he said, studying my face. "You saw through it, didn't you? Even 2 years ago. When you stepped back, you knew he wasn't cut out for this." I reflected on that moment, remembering Thomas's desperate gaze and well-thought-out words. I realized he sought this for all the wrong reasons, but I hoped maybe having the responsibility would force him to mature, to prioritize his family. Dad shook his head. "You've always shielded him, Sarah, ever since you were little. Maybe that's partly my fault. I saw your potential, your strength, and let you take charge of him instead of holding him accountable." His words struck a chord. For as long as I could remember, I had been fixing Thomas's mistakes, covering for him, allowing him to take what he wanted because it was easier than confronting him. "Well," I said, glancing at the pile of audit reports before me, "he's facing the consequences now." The criminal investigation moved swiftly. The evidence was irrefutable, and Thomas's attempt to blame the errors on accounting didn't stand up. He was looking at serious charges for embezzlement and fraud. Rachel and the kids temporarily moved in with her parents. I ensured she had access to emergency funds and secured the best divorce lawyer in the city. The children were struggling, especially Emily, 14, who couldn't grasp why her father had betrayed them. "How do I explain this to them?" Rachel asked one evening, sitting in her parents' garden, watching the kids play. "How do I tell them their father chose money and a mistress over their future?" I wish I had the perfect answer, but I could only promise to be there, to help rebuild the broken pieces that Thomas had left behind. The company weathered the scandal mostly because we acted swiftly. We implemented new financial safeguards, reorganized the board, and I assumed my rightful role as CEO. Clients stuck with us, with many expressing they'd always preferred working with me. 6 months after the dust settled, I received a letter from Thomas, still behind bars. His handwriting was unsteady, but his attempt at manipulation was still clear. "I know I made mistakes," he wrote, "but we're family. Families forgive. When I get out, maybe we can work together again." I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should remain in ashes. A year passed. Carter Industries flourished under my leadership, expanding into new markets and launching groundbreaking projects. Rachel and the kids found their own home, a house I helped her buy in a top-tier school district. Emily started showing an interest in business, often visiting me after school. "I want to learn everything," she told me one day. "I want to be strong like you." It wasn't lost on me, my brother's daughter wanting to follow in my footsteps rather than his. I made sure she understood that true strength wasn't about taking from others to get ahead. It was about building something meaningful, something that helped others succeed, too. One night, after a long day at the office, I found Dad waiting by my car. "Remember when you were 10? He asked. "You set up that little tutoring business, helping the kids in the neighborhood with their homework." I smiled at the memory. "You paid me $5 to tutor Thomas in math. You turned it into a full-fledged enterprise. Schedules, progress reports, even achievement certificates." He chuckled. "Should have known then that you were destined for this." "Better late than never," I replied, with no bitterness. The past couldn't be undone, but the future looked brighter than ever. Thomas received a 12-year sentence for his crimes. The judge was especially harsh about his theft from the children's trust funds. I ensured those funds were not only restored but also fortified with legal protections. Rachel eventually started dating again, a kind man who coached Tommy's Little League team and helped Emily with her science projects. Life moved forward, as it always does. The last time I saw Thomas was at his sentencing. He looked small in his prison uniform, his designer suits and cocky swagger gone. As they led him away, he cast one final glance at me. In his eyes, I saw the same little boy who always expected his big sister to make everything right, to fix his problems. But that pattern was broken now, and we both knew it. 2 years after the scandal, I stood at a podium accepting an award for Business Leader of the Year. Looking out at the crowd, I saw my family, Dad, Rachel, the kids, even Marcus with his wife, all smiling with pride. "Success in business isn't just about numbers," I said in my acceptance speech. "It's about integrity. It's about creating something that lifts others instead of tearing them down." The hardest lessons often come from those closest to us, but they're the ones that matter most. Later that evening, Emily asked me why I'd ever handed over the CEO role to her father. "I thought I was doing the right thing," I answered honestly. Sometimes we confuse sacrifice with strength and enabling with love. True strength is knowing when to stop sacrificing yourself for someone who never learns to stand on their own. She nodded, wise beyond her years. "I'm glad you're running the company now," she said. "Dad always said business was about winning at any cost, but you've shown it's about doing the right thing too." Looking at her, so full of hope and determination, I knew every painful decision had been worth it. Thomas had tried to destroy our family's legacy for his own selfish desires, but in the end, he'd only shown us all what real strength was. It wasn't in taking from others. It wasn't in manipulation or lies. True strength was in building something meaningful, protecting those who needed it, and having the courage to stand up when someone you love is in the wrong. The company Thomas had tried to ruin was stronger than ever, built on integrity and true family values. And the sister he'd always underestimated had finally stopped making herself small to accommodate his greed. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't in what we gain, but in what we refuse to lose: our integrity, our purpose, and our ability to differentiate true love from toxic enabling. That's a lesson worth any price. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay inspired.